Okay. Hi everyone, welcome back. This coming Friday night is the holiday of Sukkot. So we're going to learn a sikha from the Rebbe dealing with Sukkot. The Rebbe looks at it a little differently. I think you'll enjoy his take on this. He says that during the holiday of Sukkot, as all of the festivals of the month of Tishrei, the quintessence of the Jewish soul is revealed. This is a very special time for us, where from the beginning, from Elul until the end of Simchas Torah, each part of our soul is revealed, and our connection with God, our relationship with God, becomes stronger and stronger. One holiday after the other, after the other, after the other. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that God wants us to be close to Him. God is our Father, Avinu Shebashamayim. He's our Father in heaven. And He wants to have a relationship with us. So one time during the year, for several weeks, God says to us, come into my house. Let's talk. Let's be together. Let's talk. Let's say, how are you doing? How's everything going with you? And God wants a personal relationship with all of us. And that is even more so during the holiday of Sukkot. We know that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the high holidays. And of course, that is a very, very important time for Jewish people to come to shul and to be involved. But Sukkot is even more important than that. Sukkot is even on a higher level than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur even. We'll see why. The Rebbe says that our service to God in this month, during the whole month of Tishrei, is not confined to a person's soul powers, his intellectual or emotional aspects, as in the rest of the year, but derives from a deeper source, the very essence of the soul which transcends its particular powers. So during the rest of the year, we relate to God intellectually, emotionally, through Torah study, through prayer, through emotions. We cry out to God. Prayer is considered an emotional experience, but this holiday is even higher than that. It's on a higher level and a deeper level. And this holiday, the holiday of Sukkot, touches the very essence of the soul, even the highest level of all. At the end of Yom Kippur, we have been fasting for 25 hours. We've been praying the whole day. We're at such a high, we're at such a lofty level that what happens after that? Do we go all the way down? And the Rebbe would say, no, actually we go higher even go higher than Yom Kippur, beyond Yom Kippur, because right away, 5 days later, is the holiday of Sukkot, which is even a higher spiritual level than Yom Kippur even. It is the essence which forms an indissoluble bond with God's essence. Our essence joins together with God's essence. A love between the Jew and God which can never be quenched. And we have that close relationship that no one else in the world has that relationship. The holidays are a time for the Jews to come close to God. Certainly God is close to everybody, Jew and non-Jew. But we are God's chosen people. We are God's special people that He chose us from among all the nations to receive the Torah and to have this unique relationship with. We are an Segula. We are a special nation to God. And during this particular time period, during these holidays, that relationship is expressed very, very closely. So this is a time specifically for Jews to get together with God. So the Rebbe says that there's an expression, his right hand embraces me. Love can be shown in various ways, through speech, what we speak to, how we look at someone else, to kiss someone else, and to embrace someone else. How do we express our love to someone else? By saying nice things to them, by telling them, I love you, by looking at them and looking into their eyes and really showing love that way, by giving them a kiss, and of course an embrace, a hug. The highest form actually is an embrace, if you think about it, which displays a love so strong as to be incommunicable by any other means. The embrace, a hug, is something you don't say anything. You just say, give me a hug. Someone will say, I need a hug. Come here. give me a hug. These days with the coronavirus, you can't hug so many people anymore, of course. But family we can, people who are close to us we can. And a hug says everything. When we hold another person next to us and we feel them and we push them towards us, there is a connection between us that no one else has. We are together to the exclusion of everyone else. And when we hug someone else, we don't just hug their front, we hug their back. We hug every part of them. Most of the other expressions of love, a kiss, a speech, a look, all have to do with the front of a person. A hug even has to do with the back of a person. The Alter Rebbe writes that a hug is that one encounters a person on all sides, including from behind, and does not allow him to part from oneself. If he wants to get away from you, he can't. You got him. He's stuck with you. You're together. We should try that sometimes. We should do more hugging, I think. All other expressions of love are directed to a person's front. The other types of love, moreover, are limited to the reception received, and it depends on how they reciprocate the love to you. If you're talking to someone and showing you love them, well, they may not love you back. They may say, well, they may be cold to you or not talk to you in such a loving way as you're talking to them. When you look at them in the eyes, they may divert their eyes from you and show that they don't really love you as much as you love them. But when it comes to a hug is something that you can't get out of. You're stuck together. So he says here, if the other ways of love, if it's not returned, it is spurned. It will quickly evaporate. It will go away. You talk to somebody, you call them on the phone, have a talk with them, you show you love them, but if they don't call you back, if they don't want to talk to you, that's not good news. That means that they're not reciprocating your love for them. But an embrace is not like that. When one does not allow him to part from oneself, it is a love without limits, regardless of the recipient's reaction. Even if the other should turn his back and desire to sever all relations, the love will remain unaffected as long as before. We know that sometimes if you're having an argument with your wife, for example, and you want to come back together again, you want to show your love again to each other, the best way to do that is by hugging. Say, I'm going to give you a hug. Just come on over, I'm going to give you a hug. Certainly you do it with that person's permission, but the hug will say everything. The hug tells everything. Such a love exists between God and the Jewish people, and its revelation takes place on the holiday of Sukkot, to which the verse, his right hand embraces me, is applied, and that is from the book of Shir HaShirim, the book of Song of Songs. The bond between a Jew's essence and God's essence is revealed on this holiday. And it's a bond so strong as to be unshakable, even if a Jew should not feel any love for God and wishes to part from him. Namely, he cannot. God embraces him and does not allow him to leave. The bond between the Jewish people and God is inviolable. We're stuck together. We're with each other. How does that work? How does that bond come about? So this revelation of this bond, God's embrace of the Jewish people, which takes place on Sukkot, is expressed in the mitzvah of Sukkah. How? Every other mitzvah is associated with a particular limb of the person who performs it. For example, we put on tefillin with our arm. We daven, we pray with our mouth. We learn Torah with our mind, for example. By sitting in a sukkah is the only mitzvah performed with one's entire body. We come into the sukkah, and it encompasses all of our limbs from head to toe. Similar to a mikveh, actually. Because a mikveh also, a ritual bath, you go into the mikveh completely with your whole body, and it touches every part of you. But the difference between a mikveh and a sukkah is that you don't live in a mikveh. A mikveh is something where you go to immerse yourself at one point to remove some ritual impurity from you. A sukkah, you can come into the sukkah even if you are totally impure, even if you've done things that you regret, things that you are sorry for, and you live in a sukkah. It says, Sukkos teish v'shivas yamim, in sukkahs we should dwell for 7 days. We live in the sukkah. The sukkah becomes our home. That's where we are. And just like a person comes into their home with everything they've got, in their good days and in their bad days, whether they are been proud of the things that they've done during the week or that day or not. Your home is, after all, your home. It's a place where you live. We can go further. The mitzvah sukkahs, our sages say, is that you shall dwell in it in the same manner as you ordinarily live. So you should take your chairs out there and you eat your meals out there. Many people sleep in the sukkah as well. The sukkah becomes your home. If you're going to sit down and read the newspaper, go outside the sukkah and read the newspaper. If you want to talk with your friends, tell them, let's meet outside of my sukkah. We'll sit together with my friends. One does not do anything special in the sukkah. One eats and drinks there. Now, on Yom Kippur, you have to do a lot of praying. You got to know the Hebrew and take a look at the book and you know when to stand, when to sit, when to do this, when to do that. On Sukkot, it's simply a mitzvah to go in the sukkah and have something to eat, something to drink. Then it's a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah, to drink in the sukkah, just as you do in your regular house the rest of the year. So the sukkah is the place where we live. It's interesting, the sukkah is called a temporary dwelling. A temporary dwelling. And our house is a permanent dwelling, obviously. But is it true? Actually, I always say that our house, is really our temporary dwelling, and the sukkah is really our permanent dwelling. How so? Because Jewish people have traveled around the world and have been expelled by many different countries over the years. So can we honestly say that our home will actually always be our home? You know, the average family in America moves every 7 years. Every 7 years. I imagine that you have probably moved in your lifetime many, many, many times over your lifetime. But the sukkah remains steady. We have always been dwelling in a sukkah. Wherever we've been, whatever we have been doing, we've always dwelt in the sukkah. We've taken the sukkah with us. When Jews went from Europe to America, in Europe they had a sukkah, and in America they had a sukkah. Wherever they've gone, Jews were expelled from various countries throughout the world over the years, but we always dwelt in a sukkah. So in many respects, actually, the sukkah has been permanent, and our homes have been temporary. But when done in a sukkah, when we do all of our mundane activities, eating and drinking, meeting in a sukkah, each of these ordinary acts becomes a mitzvah. So just eating, normally you just eat. But when you eat in the sukkah, you've just done a mitzvah. You just performed a mitzvah by eating in a sukkah. So all of our mundane activities are transformed into holy activities, into godly activities. When you meet your friend in the sukkah, it's now become a mitzvah that you're sitting in the sukkah, you're dwelling in the sukkah. This parallels the idea expressed in the directives, in all your ways you should know him. And all your deeds should be for the sake of heaven. All of your deeds should be for the sake of heaven. Even your ways, your deeds, one's personal affairs, not just mitzvahs, should be devoted to God, since the bond between a Jew and God is encompassing. It must be expressed in everything a Jew does, in every aspect. Judaism is not just for the synagogue. Judaism is not just for the home. Judaism is for the street. Judaism is for everywhere we go. I understand that there were some Jewish astronauts, and they took some Jewish articles, perhaps a mezuzah and other things with them on the spaceship. to the space shuttle, to the International Space Station. I understand Jessica Meir, the last astronaut that went up to the space station, took with her some Jewish articles to remind that even though she's in outer space, she is still a Jew and carries her Jewishness with her. Sukkot and the mitzvah Sukkot in particular emphasizes and brings to the fore this relationship between Jews and their Creator. It is the time when literally his right hand embraces me, even from behind, as it says, even from behind. The front of a person symbolizes those things in which godliness is evident: Torah study, prayer, observance of mitzvahs, for example. Behind symbolizes one's mundane, daily pursuits, which seem to lack any type of sanctity at all. Just regular activities. On Sukkot, a Jew does even such things in the Sukkah, even things from the aspect of behind, things which are not necessarily holy things in themselves. They're not unholy, but they're just mundane, regular activities. You have dinner, you sit down and read a book, you talk with your children, you talk with your wife and your husband. You just do regular mundane activities that do not seem necessarily to have any holy aspect to them, but by doing them in the sukkah, they are elevated to the level of holiness. And of course, the ideal is that these things should continue that way a whole year, not just in the holiday sukkahs. God's embrace, the Rebbe says, in Sukkot is enforced not just when Jews are actually in the sukkah. They exist when a Jew is outside of the sukkah also, similar to a mezuzah, which you put a mezuzah on the door, and the mezuzah protects you while you're in the house, but also when you're out of the house as well. So the Talmud states that any person who does not have a house, does not have a home, is not a complete person. Unfortunately, homeless people feel this very much. They are homeless. They don't have a home. They have no place to go. So they are out in the street. And why do we feel so bad for them? Because in many respects, they're not much of a person that way. They have no home. It's a very tragic, very sad situation for them to be out in the street, to be homeless, not to have a place to go to at the end of the day. And certainly all of us who are fortunate, thank God, to have a home, know that as difficult as things can be, as hard as the world can be, or your work, or whatever it may be, people can be cruel, and people can be difficult, but you can always go home. And when you go home, your home is your castle, as they say. Your home is your fortress. Your home is your comfort, the place where everything, all the influences of the outside go away, and your home is the place where you are safe. The home is the place where you are protected, unless of course you live in a hurricane zone, but that's another story. The Talmud states this idea that a person without a home is not a complete person. The distinction conferred by a home applies not just when the person is actually in the house, but even when he is outside. For as long as he has a home in which to dwell, his connection to it remains constant. We're not talking about people necessarily who own homes. You don't have to own your home, but you have a home to live in. You have a place where you live. That's your address. That's where you are. Very often you'll meet someone, you'll say, "Where do you live?" And you'll say, "In University City." "That's my home." "Oh, really? What street do you live on?" "I live on Governor Drive." "Oh, what's your number?" What number street?" "I live nearby." My home is near your home, or I know where you live, or you are, you're living in a particular place. That is where your base of operations is. In fact, in Jewish tradition, the important institution of Jewish life is not the synagogue, it's the home. If you think about it, all of our major rituals take place in the home. We light a menorah at home. We have a Pesach Seder at the home. We have our Shabbos meals at home. All of the things we do, we have Purim meals at home. All of the things, the major things we do in Jewish life are done at home. And most other things can be done in home or elsewhere. You can put on tefillin anywhere, home or and even on the street. But the home remains the center of Jewish life. And it's interesting that I always find that it's interesting that the difference between Reform and Orthodox synagogues are that I find that Reform synagogues tend to be the largest ones. Conservative synagogues are a little smaller. Orthodox synagogues, with a few exceptions, are usually much smaller. In fact, when I have groups come to our synagogue, thank God we have a nice sized synagogue, but they are used to humongous churches, big churches, non-religious groups, or even Jewish groups that are not so Orthodox. They're surprised at how small our synagogue is. For me, it's very large, but for them, it's quite small. They never expect it. And why is that? Why is it that the more liberal the Jewish life, the larger the synagogue? And you'll take a look practically everywhere you go. It's like that. The answer is because the more liberal Jewish life, the main center of Jewish life is their synagogue or their temple. Their people do not observe Judaism so much at home. They don't know how to make a Friday night whole dinner, and with us, Friday night is the mainstay of Jewish life. You go to synagogue, you pray for half an hour, and then you go home. And you spend the rest of the evening at home. And what do you do at home? You sing Shalom Aleichem, you make Kiddush, you have a beautiful meal that was prepared for you. At the meal, you sing songs, Zemiros and Nigunim, you talk words of Torah, and the Shabbos meal can go on for several hours. And it's a beautiful thing, and people really look forward to a Shabbos meal. I always ask people, when you were younger, did you have a Shabbos meal? Where do you think that Shabbos meal was? At the synagogue? No, it was at home. That's where the Shabbos meal was, or the holiday meal. It was at home. So what do we need big synagogues for? We don't need big synagogues if our main Jewish life is at home. And that's why Orthodox synagogues tend to be on the smaller side, because we practice Judaism primarily at home, as the way it should. Unfortunately, the more liberal Jewish communities, to their credit, their people don't know how to make or don't want to make a Shabbos meal, so they transfer it to the synagogue. And the synagogue becomes the mainstay of Jewish life, where Friday nights they have a big service with a cantor, with a choir, with a whole meal, with the Oneg Shabbat, and you go there for several hours because they have transferred Jewish life to their temple. And it's a noble try of keeping Jewish life alive, and I admire that and I respect that. But perhaps what we should be doing better is encouraging our people to get Jewish, to be Jewish at home. You know, there was an ad in the New York years ago, I remember, that said, "Families that pray together stay together." Maybe you remember that. But the idea was, come to church and you will be more close as a family. Well, we don't believe in that. We've never believed in that. We believe families that are home together stay together. That's what we believe in. That the home is the mainstay of Jewish life. And that's why it is not the man who is in charge of Jewish life, really, it's the woman. Because the woman is the Akeres Habayis. The woman is the foundation of the home. And if Jewish life is centered on the home, and the woman is the head of the household, she's the boss. She's in charge of Jewish life. That's how it is. The synagogue is not the mainstay of Jewish life. In fact, the temples in days of old, the Beis Hamikdash, was in the form of a home. It's called Beis Hamikdash, the Bayit, the Beis Hamikdash, the house of holiness. And the articles inside the temple were articles similar to a Jewish home. The altar was like the stove. The sacrifices were like food. The bread was food. The lights, the menorah, was like the lights in a home. So all the table, the shulchan, was the table that we have as the mainstay of a home. You have a table, a dinner table, a breakfast table. So all of these things are based on a Jewish home. That's the whole idea. A temple is in the place of a home. Let's get back to the Sikha a little bit. On Sukkot, a person's dwelling is the Sukkah. And therefore, during the holiday, it is the Sukkah which makes one a complete person, because that's our home. It thus follows that on Sukkot, even when one is not actually in the Sukkah, his connection to it remains, just like your connection to your home always remains, even when you're outside. He is still enveloped in God's embrace. No other mitzvah possesses such qualities like that. Because the Sukkah reveals the essence of the soul, it also works as a force for unity also in the world. We know that the holiday of Sukkot is a holiday of unity. It's a holiday that we encourage people to come in and to join together with us, no matter who they are, no matter how religious they are. We say to them, come on into the Sukkah. You know, Chabad has a custom that we have developed called a Sukkah-mobile. In many communities, they take a truck and they rent a truck, like an open flatbed truck of some sort, and they build a sukkah on the truck. And they take the sukkah around to universities, to shopping centers, or just to the streets of Manhattan, or wherever it may be. And we encourage people to come in and to make a blessing on the lulav and esrog, and to have a piece of honey cake in the sukkah. We do that. And many people are a little bit uncomfortable with that. They don't want to come inside. What, are you trying to make me religious or something? We'll say, no, just come on in. Just come enjoy. Just participate. Just have a bite to eat, a piece of cake, have some juice, and do it in the sukkah over here. We say, that's it? Yeah, make a blessing on it. That's all you need to do. And it's a beautiful thing. We bring sukkahs to all the major places in the country, outside of office buildings, and as I said, in universities, so people can have an opportunity to come into the sukkah, sit down, maybe have their lunch there, or their dinner there, or just a snack, and just come and do it in the sukkah. The sukkah really breaks down limitations and boundaries and barriers among people. When all you're asking a person to do is come and have a bite to eat, come on over, join me for dinner tonight. Why don't you come over to my house? Come on over. Let's just sit down and have something to eat. I remember years ago, there was a family that came to our synagogue, and they were having big fights. The husband wanted to be very religious, and the woman, the wife, didn't want to be religious at all. And the kids are being torn apart, back and forth, back and forth. The woman was very anti-religious, but she was deeply spiritual. She came from a Sephardic family from France, and she was very deeply spiritual. So she said to me one time when we were talking, she said, you know, you would never eat in my house. And you know something? We even have a sukkah, but I bet you wouldn't even eat there. Well, I love it there. So I said to her, Madame, I would be honored to come and eat in your sukkah. And she said, what would you eat? Nothing's kosher in my house. My house is completely not kosher. I said to her, look at me. Do I look like I'm starving to death? Absolutely not. I will always find something to eat in your home. Always. I will always find something that I can eat in your home. There's fruits, there's vegetables, there's always something. And she dared me to come over and to do that, and I did. And she had the children there, and I came, and I said, what a beautiful sukkah you have over here. This is magnificent. She said, yeah, I built it myself. That's a beautiful sukkah. I said, well, let's come inside and we'll make a blessing. What do you have? She said, well, I have some fruit. I have some celery and carrot sticks. Wonderful. I have some soda or some juice. Great. And she said she went to our neighborhood kosher market and she even got some cookies. I said, that's terrific. Let's come in. Let's eat. We'll eat in the sukkah. And this woman, who was so anti-religious because of her husband, who was so overbearing, she couldn't believe it, that I was coming to her house. The rabbi was coming to her house and sitting and enjoying a nice snack, a lovely time with her and her children, Her husband was at work, and we had a lovely time together. And that broke down a barrier with her that was very strong. In fact, I had more respect for her than I ever had for anyone else, because even though she was not so observant and she was very headstrong about it, but still her Jewishness was very deep and very spiritual. And I looked at her bookshelf in her home, which was in her living room, which I saw there. And I saw many books on Jewish spirituality, many books that I had in my own home, she had in her home. And I asked her, do you read those books? She said, oh yes. She said, I may not be so observant, but I am very spiritual. Every Jew is spiritual. Every single Jew is like that. Because the Rebbe says because the Sukkot reveals the essence of the soul. It also works as a force for unity. Differences between Jews exist only externally. If you think about it, in intellect or emotions, in the soul's essence, no such divisions exist. In the soul's essence, we are all one. There's a very beautiful chapter in the classic Chabad work, the Tanya, chapter Lamed Beis, the 32nd chapter of Tanya, chapter 32. Lamed Beis in Hebrew is Lev, the heart. So it's the heart of the Tanya. And what does the Tanya say? What does it say there? It says that we are all separate beings. We all have separate bodies. In our body, we're all different. You, from me, from all of us, even our children and us. We're different people. We have different bodies, different intellects, different emotions. We look differently in many respects. We're not exactly carbon copies or clones of each other. But when we look at our soul, when we understand the idea of the soul, in this respect, we are all one. We are all united completely in our souls, completely. Our bodies may be different, but our souls are exactly alike. There, in our souls, all Jews are one. This too is expressed by the mitzvah of Sukkot. As our sages have said, all Yisrael, all Jews are worthy, Kol Yisrael, Royim Leishe B'Sukkah Achas, they say, which is found in the Talmud. All Jews are fitting to dwell in one sukkah. In one sukkah. And what is that big sukkah? That sukkah is the Jewish people. The temple, the Beis HaMikdash, was called the sukkah. Sukkot David HaNafel is the sukkah of David that fell. It was a sukkah. So the sukkah represents the shelter and the home of each and every single Jew, wherever they are throughout the world. It's a beautiful thing if you think about it. I've been sending pictures of our sukkah and us eating in the sukkah in the future with relatives and friends in Toronto, Canada, and Israel, and all over the world. And they say, oh, take a look at my sukkah. Take a look at our sukkah. See our sukkah here, our sukkah there. We're all sitting in the same sukkah, my friends. It's one big tent, as they say, one big sukkah. We're all sitting in it together. And we are all fitting to sit in one sukkah together because all of our souls are one. The sukkah resembles the clouds of glory, as we know. Why do we dwell in sukkahs? One of the opinions is because we dwelt in sukkahs in the desert as we traveled through the desert for 40 years. But the other reason is because the sukkahs remind us of the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory that accompanied the Jewish people through the desert and protected us through the desert. And we were all healthy, completely healthy. We could all have perfect vision, perfect hearing, perfect sight. All of our clothes were laundered as we wore them. And we lacked for nothing. The food that we got, the manna from heaven, came to our doorstep. And the water was from the well of Miriam. Everything was provided for us. We had no needs. Everything was there. So the sukkahs really were there to protect us and to shelter us, as nothing else could do that. Just as all Jews were surrounded equally by the clouds surrounded the whole camp of all the Jewish people together, with no difference between the more or less righteous. In other words, you think about it, the Jews were camped throughout the desert, and the clouds covered all of us on all sides, up and down and to the sides and everywhere. Did the clouds discriminate based on who you were, on what synagogue you went to, on if you were righteous or not so righteous? Were you a man or a woman, a grown-up or a child? No, the clouds surrounded all of us equally in the desert, with no difference at all between us. This is a beautiful idea. In truth, all the festivals of Tishrei reveal the essence of a Jew, all of them. The blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, for example, symbolizes the soul's cry out to God, a cry that testifies that though a Jew may presently be removed from godliness because of his sins, his essence nevertheless remains whole and devoted to God. So every single Jew hears the call of the shofar. And the shofar calls out to all of us. This last year, a few days ago, a week ago, we had Sukkot, we had Rosh Hashanah. And there were many people, because of the virus, who didn't want to come to shul. They were afraid of having contact with other people. They were afraid of catching the virus. Some people were not even comfortable, even though we were outside. They were not comfortable coming in. They stayed beyond the gates. They stayed outside of our gates. But when it came to the shofar, they all wanted to hear the shofar. Later in the day, we blew the shofar several times. There were probably almost 100 people each time who came, who did not come to synagogue, who did not participate in the service, but who wanted to hear the shofar. Why? Because the shofar touches the very essence of the Jew. It's the very essence of the Jew. It says his essence remains whole and devoted to God no matter who they are. A Jew's innate longing to be close to his Father in heaven, to God, and his distress at his low spiritual state cannot be articulated. A Jew does not feel good if they're not close to God, if they're not keeping mitzvahs, if they're not connected with Jewish life. A Jew feels bad about that. They don't quite know what to do about it. It can only express itself in a heartfelt cry, symbolized by the simple blast of the shofar. We are told the shofar represents the cry of a child inside. The child is crying. They want to be close to their father and their mother. And the shofar represents the cry inside of each and every one of our own soul that cries out to God. And it says, please God, I'm sorry for what I've done. Please God, accept me. Please God, love me. There is a very beautiful discourse of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Kuntras Hamayim. And it says in the Kuntras, it says in the discourse, that if a Jew truly understood that by doing an Aveira, by doing a transgression, it would sever their bond with God, they would never do any transgression. It's just that a Jew has in mind, well, if I eat that non-kosher thing, it's okay, there's nothing wrong with it. But if a Jew really knew that by doing that, it would cause his connection to God to lessen, he would never do it. Never. But the problem is, we are motivated not by our intellect, which would tell us the correct thing to do, but by our emotions. And it says that when a person is motivated by a ruach shtus, a spirit of folly, a spirit of foolishness, that's when we get into trouble. But if we are motivated by our intellect alone, we would never get into trouble. Because each and every mitzvah is like a strand that connects us to God. It says, Yaakov, Chevel Nachalaso, Yaakov is the rope of his inheritance. The Jewish people are connected to God like with a rope. And a rope has many, many different strands. The rope that connects us to God has 613 strands corresponding to the 613 commandments. And each one of those strands makes our connection to God that much stronger. When we lose those strands, when we do not do so many of those mitzvahs, one strand after the other is torn away, until finally we are left with only one strand left. But that strand is a powerful one. That strand is the essence of the Jew. We are saying the Rebbe points out in that one that every single Jew is connected. Even a Jew that, as it says, the only thing about him is that he is called a Jew. B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna. He is called a Jew. That's the only thing about it that's Jewish. He's Jewish. He's a Jew. That's it. It's his name. That's about it. So for that person alone, that strand always remains there. A Jew can never, ever sever that strand of the rope that connects us to God. And because the bond between the Jew and God is always in force, it redeems him from his state of being in the dumps, in a miserable state. And it enables him to transcend the material and live with the spiritual. How is it that a person is able to transform the material world and make it into a spiritual place? By taking the physical world and doing something spiritual with it. And that's our job. That's what mitzvahs are all about. Taking physical things, taking this physical world, and raising it up and making it into a holy place. In fact, in Hasidic philosophy, it's really brought down that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is our friend. How is the Yetzer Hara our friend? Because the Yetzer Hara is connected to the physical world. Everything in the physical world. We like to eat, we like to drink, we like to do all kinds of activities which are purely physical activities. And how does that draw us closer to God? Because these are the things that draw us closer to God. God put us in a physical world to raise up the physical world and make it into a holy place. So the Yetzer Hara is really our friend because it encourages us. Get some sleep, have something to eat, have something to drink, procreate, do things that are good for you. But the bond revealed in the mitzvah Sukkah is loftier yet. It is not expressed through transcending the physical world, but rather a Jew's relation with God represented by the Sukkah is manifest even in your personal mundane pursuits. So in your deeds, in all of your ways you shall find him, means that in everything, even our physical world, there we find God. Also then a Jew is in God's embrace, as we said earlier, and his deeds are performed for the sake of heaven, and God is known in all his ways. So I want to wish everyone a very beautiful Sukkot. I hope if you haven't built a Sukkah already, contact your local synagogue or Chabad center. They'd be happy to help you. If you need a lulav and esrog, seek it out. Many places have. We still have a few left. If you want a lulav and esrog, we still may have a few left. Contact me, rabbi@chabaduc.org, and we can make contact for that. And we look forward to seeing you in shul, or not. Have a good day.